Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel Filmy Recaps. Today I'm going to explain 2018 Korean movie On Your Wedding Day. Spoilers ahead, the movie starts with Woo-yeon playing a school game of football. Afterwards, Woo-yeon returns to his desk in the teacher's office room only to find a card sent to him by a woman named Hwan Sung-hee. He recalls how he never knew of the surname Hwan until he met Sung-hee. And so the movie takes us back to when Woo-yeon met this so-called Hwan Sung-hee. Woo-yeon gets reprimanded by his teacher for getting into a fight earlier that day. As Woo-yeon is penalized in the teacher's office room, a new student enters alongside a teacher. Her name is Hwan Sung-hee, Park Bo-young, and she's a senior transferring from Jeonju. Of course, Sung-hee immediately captures Woo-yeon's attention and he suddenly forgets about his punishment. After Sung-hee finishes her discussion with her teacher, Woo-yeon creeps up to Sung-hee and introduces himself to her. Woo-yeon grows embarrassed and crawls away. One day after school, Sung-hee invites Woo-yeon to go with her on a quickie. Woo-yeon assumes she's referring to some sexual activity as that's how he's always interpreted the word, but Sung-hee is referring to something totally different. Later on that night, Woo-yeon stops by a convenience store to buy something before heading home with Sung-hee. Of course, Sung-hee wasn't referring to anything dirty and grows suspicious of the item that Woo-yeon bought at the store. She gives him a good slap in the face and pokes fun at him afterwards for his misinterpretation of the slang word. The next day at school, Sung-hee teases Woo-yeon about the slang term while walking back to her classroom. Not wanting to interact with Taek-hee, Sung-hee prepares to skip class once again, so she exits the school building. On the way to the school wall where she last escaped with Woo-yeon, Sung-hee encounters Woo-yeon fighting once again with another student. Thankfully, Woo-yeon rescues her just in time as Sung-hee is about to fall, and together the two make their escape. The two head out for another outing of rice cakes, but this time they're accompanied by school bully Taek-hee and his team. Woo-yeon makes a deal with Sung-hee, he'll stop fighting if he becomes Sung-hee's boyfriend. She uses her relationship with Woo-yeon as an excuse to drive Taek-hee away. Lol. Later on that night, Woo-yeon updates his best friend Kang-nam, Kang Ki-young, on the news. That didn't fly by Dad of course, and Dad beat Gun-nam up. The next day at school, Woo-yeon sits with Sung-hee during lunch. This doesn't sit well with Taek-hee and he throws a milk carton all the way across the room at Woo-yeon. Woo-yeon doesn't mind the attack and even drinks out of the milk carton that was thrown. Lol. Later on that day, Sung-hee and Woo-yeon go out on another escape again. She also encourages Woo-yeon to study or else he's going to waste his life away. Woo-yeon and Sung-hee make a run for it and manage to successfully hide from their teacher. That night, Sung-hee and Woo-yeon wash their clothes at Woo-yeon's place. While Woo-yeon suggests they watch a movie, Sung-hee takes the time to look around his bedroom. This throws Woo-yeon off and he finally notices the pile of magazines in Sung-hee's hands. Sung-hee's curiosity gets the best of her and she asks Woo-yeon about masturbation. When asked when exactly he started masturbating, Woo-yeon throws out a time, but Sung-hee was asking for an age. Lol. Gun-nam. The next day at school, Taek-hee confronts Woo-yeon and wants to fight him. To keep his promise with Sung-hee, Woo-yeon doesn't fight Taek-hee back nor throw a punch at him. However, she does worry about him later on that night when the two go out for some late-night snacks and seems proud of Woo-yeon for being able to keep his promise with her. Woo-yeon assumes he'll receive a kiss from Sung-hee as a reward, but all he receives is a weird stare from Sung-hee instead. When they finish their snacks, the couple walks back to their homes. This heavily impacts Sung-hee's mood and she begins to act oddly the next day at school. To cheer her up, Woo-yeon sneaks into the school's media room and performs to Sung-hee's favorite song. They lock the doors carefully so that Woo-yeon can continue his performance for Sung-hee. Sung-hee also has a gift for Woo-yeon. She draws a picture of a couple kissing each other on the palm of his hands and kisses Woo-yeon afterwards. When he approaches the shop, Woo-yeon finally understands why Sung-hee hasn't been at school. Sung-hee screams at Woo-yeon to leave upon making eye contact with him, in which he does. Sung-hee then contacts Woo-yeon a few days later and bids farewell with him via phone call. With that, Sung-hee wishes for Woo-yeon to take care of himself and gets onto the travel bus with her mother. They leave the town. In the present, Woo-yeon cheers up a crying student in the bathroom who's upset over a rejection by a girl. Woo-yeon shares with the student a story of when he used to fry chicken to make a living since he assumed he wouldn't make it into college. Woo-yeon has no plans of attending college until he discovers a picture of Sung-hee hidden inside of a university ad. Woo-yeon immediately changes his mind and studies another year in high school in hopes that he'll be accepted into the same university as Sung-hee. His parents are in disbelief at the fact that their son wants to go to college, but they don't stop him. They as well as Gunnam help Woo-yeon and give him all their support. All the hard work and studying eventually pays off as Woo-yeon gets accepted into Hankook University. Woo-yeon has no other plans than to find Sung-hee when he arrives at the school. Though Woo-yeon has no luck in finding Sung-hee at a rice cake booth, he does eventually find her nearby one. Gunnam helps enlighten Woo-yeon. Woo-yeon only has to worry about competing against Sung-hee's boyfriend. Not all hope is lost for Woo-yeon and he attempts to regain the love of his high school sweetheart. Watching the couple interact angers Woo-yeon and he walks away with Gunnam. Since Sung-hee is taken, Sung-hee's friend So-young, Shin So-yul, expresses interest in Woo-yeon. However, Woo-yeon isn't interested in anyone else but Sung-hee. Sung-hee and Woo-yeon volunteer to help load the heavy boxes into the car for them. That night, Woo-yeon and his friends download some porn to watch on Woo-yeon's computer. The police take Woo-yeon as well as Sung-hee with them to the station for questioning. While Sung-hee and Woo-yeon debate on whether to be honest with the police or not, the police are studying an entirely different case involving the elderly couple they were helping earlier. Woo-yeon assumes they're still talking about porn while the police wants the grandpa's contact information. They start laughing once they realize the ridiculous situation that they're in and take some time to catch up with each other. More than anything, Woo-yeon wants to know why Sung-hee fell in love with Yoon-gun. He complains to the owner of the boarding house about a couple in the room upstairs and how he can't study because of them. The owner assumes Woo-yeon is referring to her and grows angry. The owner lashes out at Woo-yeon for suddenly being a burden and inconvenience, but Woo-yeon wasn't referring to her. While Woo-yeon is endlessly yelled at by the owner, Sung-hee and Yoon-gun watch from their entrance door. Lol. While Gunnam and neighbor Supyo are occupied with talking to girls, Woo-yeon has plans of celebrating Sung-hee's birthday. At the boarding house, Woo-yeon witnesses Sung-hee receiving a necklace from Yoon-gun as a gift and grows angry. Sung-hee too notices Woo-yeon watching from not too far away, but doesn't say anything. In an act of rage, Woo-yeon throws the gift he got for Sung-hee into Yoon-gun's car and runs away. Fast forward a few months later and it's September of 2007. While laying around on a bench at school, Sung-hee approaches Woo-yeon. Later on at school, Woo-yeon is wandering around in the library when he overhears Yoon-gun talking with another girl nearby. Yoon-gun has plans to travel to Europe and invites the girl to go with him. At the football championship game, Woo-yeon reveals the news to Sung-hee. Yoon-gun has made a bet with Sung-hee that he'll take her to Europe if they win the game, but Woo-yeon informs Sung-hee that the Europe trip is just an excuse for Yoon-gun to go on the trip with the other girl. Sung-hee doesn't listen to Woo-yeon nor believe in his statements. Although the rest of the team rejoices at the win, Woo-yeon immediately punches Yoon-gun in the face after scoring. Woo-yeon is eventually dismissed from the university. Woo-yeon and Gunnam still keep in contact with the same two neighbors at the boarding house from back in college. Woo-yeon then volunteers to drive her to the locations so that she can attend her CF shootings. After a long and tiring day of shoots, Woo-yeon finally drops Sung-hee off back home. After paying Woo-yeon, Sung-hee prepares to head inside her house. Seeing the flyer reminds Sung-hee of her dreams and she looks through all her old drawings that night. 2 days later, Woo-yeon drives Sung-hee out for another CF shooting. Sung-hee then questions why Woo-yeon didn't contact her during his military service. Sung-hee took care of Woo-yeon while he was drunk and merely managed to catch the first bus that morning. So that was why Woo-yeon didn't contact Sung-hee during his military service. Woo-yeon stops the car so that Sung-hee can have some time to process the unfortunate announcement. Just like the old times, she climbs up on him to climb over the gate. "I'm not crying, I swear." Sung-hee admits that she thought about Woo-yeon frequently back then. After teasing him and recalling their memories, Woo-yeon chases after Sung-hee and grabs a hold of her. Woo-yeon leans in for a kiss, but Sung-hee avoids it. Unfortunately, the timing isn't right for Woo-yeon and Sung-hee. Woo-yeon wants to start over with Sung-hee, but she refuses. She doesn't want to rekindle the same love she and Woo-yeon had back in high school. Woo-yeon hangs on until the very end though and ends his relationship with Min-kyung, but Sung-hee isn't interested. At a CF shooting, Sung-hee and Woo-yeon confront each other about the issue until a dangerous situation ensues. Woo-yeon faints upon protecting Sung-hee from a falling door that construction workers on the rooftop of the building accidentally dropped. Woo-yeon is admitted to the hospital and Sung-hee is right there next to his side. Sung-hee then gives Woo-yeon a surprise kiss. He hugs her tightly and holds Sung-hee in her arms while she tears up. Sung-hee and Woo-yeon go on another trip. Sung-hee informs Woo-yeon about her trip to Belgium that her work company is sending her off to. It's because of her that he failed to become a teacher and is in the unfortunate situation he is in right now. Sung-hee overhears Woo-yeon's harsh words outside of the funeral house and breaks up with Woo-yeon. Just like her dad did with her mom, Woo-yeon too blames Sung-hee for ruining his life. However, Sung-hee has no plans in forgiving Woo-yeon. The absence of their couple ring on her finger indicates that she wants to end things with Woo-yeon. A few years later, Woo-yeon lands the physical education teacher position like how he had wanted. Instead of lecturing about physical education, Woo-yeon entertains his class by telling his students about his first love story with Sung-hee. Speaking of Sung-hee, Woo-yeon eventually reunites with her in the present. She stops by his school to inform him that she's getting married, hence, the wedding invitation that Woo-yeon received at the beginning of the movie. Just like all the other times, Woo-yeon throws a fit and gets drunk after hearing the news. While rumbling around, Woo-yeon finds a drawing that Sung-hee had drawn for him a while back. He tears up upon staring at the drawing and changes his mind. He's going to attend Sung-hee's wedding. So Woo-yeon and his friends devise a plan on the day of Sung-hee's wedding. While Woo-yeon's friends prevent people from entering Sung-hee's room, Woo-yeon takes the chance to visit the bride himself. Sung-hee too feels the same way towards Woo-yeon. Woo-yeon watches her in awe and even makes eye contact with Sung-hee as she makes her way to the groom. After a few seconds, Woo-yeon leaves the wedding reception and exits the room.